You've finished your first quilt top, and that is awesome. But the next step in the pattern says quilt and bind as desired. And you have no idea what you desire because you don't even know what the options are. And here's what I'm afraid is going to happen. You've done all this beautiful work, and now your quilt top is sitting in a bag in a closet somewhere. Not because you can't finish it, but because you don't know how to finish it, and that uncertainty is stopping you from doing anything. And feeling that way is completely normal. You're not supposed to automatically know how to finish a quilt. There are actual choices here, and no one has ever explained them to you before. So let's fix that. I'm going to walk you through 4 ways to finish your quilt top, from the least stressful and least time-consuming to the most time-consuming, so that you can figure out what's the best thing for you right now in your life. Because quilting is not supposed to stress you out, and you'll want to pick a method that works for you with the least amount of stress for you in your life. My suggestions do vary based on the size of the top, but for this, let's assume that you have a top to finish that's throw-sized or bigger. My number 1 recommendation for a stress-free finish to your top is to take it to a long armor. A long armor is someone who has one of these big specialized machines, and they will quilt your quilt for a fee. The cost goes up depending on the size of your quilt and the complexity of the design that you pick. So yes, it costs money, but you spent money on fabric, right? Plus, you spent oodles and oodles of time piecing that top. Getting it finished is worth it. But the main reason I'm recommending this particular method is I want you to make another quilt. And really, taking it to a long armor to finish is the least amount of stress, and it'll make you the happiest. If this final step of making your quilt is something where you're stressed out physically and emotionally, it's just not going to be a pleasant experience, and you're not going to want to make another quilt. And that would really stink because you've proved now that you can make a quilt top, so let's get it finished so you can prove that you can make a whole quilt. So having someone else quilt your quilt doesn't take much of your time, and there's nothing new to learn. It's not physically demanding, and you'll get a professionally quilted quilt that you'll be really happy to use. You drop it off, they do their thing, you pick it up, you put the binding on, you have a beautiful quilt. Now, if you really want to do every part yourself, I get that. There's something really satisfying to say, I made this whole thing. So I'll let you know that many quilt shops allow you to rent time on their Longarm. This does require learning something new. You have to learn how to use the Longarm machine, but they will provide training. And your first time will probably be a little stressful. But if you're planning to make lots and lots of quilts, this can really save you time and money in the long term. I do have a video linked down below in the description that talks about what longarming is and what the process is like. Okay, on to option number 2. And that isn't actually even quilting your quilt, it's tying your quilt. You lay out your 3 layers, the backing, the batting, and the top, probably on the floor unless you have a really big table. And then you secure them together every few inches with something like embroidery floss, tying them in little knots. This is pretty quick compared to some other methods. The biggest challenge is that you're crawling around on the floor. So if you've got a bad back or bad knees, it might be painful. In addition, tying isn't really quite as secure as quilting. You're making one tie every 4 or so inches instead of long continuous quilting lines. So the layers in tied quilts are a little more likely to shift and bunch, especially with washing. If your quilt is going to get some heavy use, it's going to be washed frequently, it's going to be dragged around, it might not be the best choice. But if your quilt is just going to live on the back of a couch, very good choice. It's fast, it's simple, your quilt is done. Option number 3 is machine quilting your quilt on your regular sewing machine. So let's start with the fact that lots of people love doing this. They find it really satisfying that they're doing the whole quilt by themselves, and once you've got a lot of practice and time in, you get really good at controlling your quilting design and choosing what you want to put on your quilt. But for a beginner quilter working on a throw-sized or bigger quilt, it's just really tough. And my whole goal is to help you make more quilts, not dread the finishing process. Here's what machine quilting a big quilt involves. First, you do have to layer and baste everything together. And again, that involves crawling around on the floor on your hands and knees again. Then you have to maneuver your quilt through your machine. When you're quilting in the middle of the quilt, you're going to have to put half the quilt up under the arm of your machine and keep it shoved in there while still trying to carefully move your quilt through the machine so that you get nice stitches. At the same time, the two other sides of the quilt are either up over your shoulder or way out in front of the machine, hanging off a table. It's really physically demanding. And this can be really overwhelming, especially the first time you do it. Now, if you have a baby-sized quilt or a table runner, this is an excellent choice. You can absolutely machine quilt smaller quilts on your regular machine without a lot of stress. It's the smaller size that makes it more manageable. If you want to learn machine quilting because it interests you, go for it. I'm not saying don't do it, I'm just saying be aware of what you're getting into before you start. If you want to try it, I do have a complete playlist linked down in the description that shows you how to layer, baste, and machine quilt a smaller quilt. But again, for your first big quilt, I don't recommend it. I'm worried that you're going to get stressed out and never want to make another quilt. Okay, the last option, number 4, is to hand quilt. And this option is really only number 4 because of the time it takes. You do still have to baste the quilt, which means you're probably crawling around on the floor. But once it's basted, you can sit comfortably with the quilt in your lap or in a hoop and hand stitch it. Hand quilting does have a little bit of a learning curve. You have to do this special rocking stitch. You'll build up some calluses, but it can be very, very relaxing. If you're drawn to this, you're probably someone who likes to do handwork and you will have a wonderful time doing this. Just be aware that it is going to take quite a while as compared to some of the other methods. So think about what you're doing when you're choosing how you're going to finish your quilt. You're not looking for the right method to do it. You're looking for the method that's going to work well for you right now in your life. And that's not because you're a beginner who doesn't know better. It's because you're being smart in protecting your love of quilting. The quilters who make quilt after quilt after quilt are not the ones who figured out how to do it some certain right way. They're the ones who figured out how to do it their right way, the way that makes them happy to be quilting. So think about your situation right now. Do you have the budget for a long armor and want a stress-free option? That's smart, not lazy. Do you have a decorative quilt that won't be washed constantly and those ties on the front will look really nice and interesting? Then tie it. Do you have a smaller quilt and you're ready to try machine quilting? Go for it. Or are you drawn to doing hand sewing and hand quilting sounds really fun and you'd love to sit on the couch and take that time? Do that. This is about making quilting work for your life. And that's not because you're a beginner, it's because you want to do this for a long time. So you want to enjoy the process. And once you finish this quilt, you'll know whether that method worked well for you. And you'll have that knowledge for finishing your next quilt. Because there will be a next one. That's the whole point of finishing this one in a way that makes you happy. Tell me in the comments how you're planning to finish your quilt. And if you've tried machine quilting a big quilt on your regular machine, tell me how it went. Whatever you choose, you're choosing to finish something beautiful that you made. And knowing that you can finish a quilt means that you can leap right into the next one with confidence. Happy sewing!